Okay, you can see I've got my pattern transferred onto my fabric using that graphite paper. And one of the things I'm going to tell you, you might be able to see where there's kind of little bitty skips in some of the lines, and that's okay because we're going to be covering everything with beads anyway. And in the middle here I'm going to be doing embroidery stitches to do this detailed design in the middle because it's just entirely too small to do with beads, at least from what I can tell right now. Anyway, but that, like I said, it's okay that it skipped a little bit because I can still make out the line straight enough to keep my beading straight. So one tip with that graphite paper is you have to press really, really hard to get it transferred onto fabric. Not quite so much transferring it to paper, but onto fabric you have to press fairly hard. And I did go ahead and load my fabric into an embroidery hoop. From what I've seen on YouTube, some beaders don't like to use hoops because they say it pulls the fabric too tight, and then when you let it loose the beading gets bunched up. So what I did was just make sure I did not load it into my hoop tightly. I left it sort of loose. It's just really going to help me hold on to my fabric. Another thing that I've had to do is I had to change the needle. I was going to use these household needles because they had a really tiny one in there, but the head of it was still too big. My seed beads were getting caught on it. So I did locate beading needles, and the eye of them is much smaller and my seed beads don't get caught on it. And I did have to switch to a smaller thread for the same reason. It's basically the same thread. It's a dual duty thread, and it's a poly cotton blend, but it's much smaller. So those are the major adjustments I made. And then I found this. My mom used to do beading, so she had some leftover supplies. So I found this little bead design board that had these nice little wells to hold beads. So I'm going to utilize that. But anyway, to get started, from what I've seen on the internet, and you guys, we're going to be learning together here, you just basically, to secure your thread, I'm just going to go through to the other side. You just weave it, just stitch it back and forth and weave it just to make sure that your weaving stays on the inside line of your design, and catch that tail. Sorry. Catch the tail in your weaving, which I didn't do on that pass, but I'm going to try again. And this doesn't have to be pretty. It's just to secure the thread so that your beading doesn't come unwoven. There, I caught that tail that time. And I'm just going to do that a couple more times and then start beading. Okay, so now I've got a little bit of weaving done just to secure my thread to the fabric. And what I'm going to do is come up at this point with my needle, and this is where I have to really start paying attention and being careful. Okay, so I'm coming up at that very bottom point, and I'm going to pick up 3 seed beads. I might pick up 3 seed beads. We'll see how this goes. Here we go. And I'm going to let them fall to the fabric. And from what I understand, this is the basic back stitch for bead embroidery. Sorry, I'm having a hard time getting a good camera angle here. Let me turn it and see if that helps. Okay, so now that I'm going to hold the beads in place with my thumb, hold them securely in place, and hopefully not continue to stab myself with the needle. And I'm going to go down the fabric where that last bead is. Pull them snug. And then I'm going to come up behind the second bead, hopefully. And then go through beads 2 and 3. And we've made our first back stitch. And it doesn't look bad. I'm pretty excited. So what I'm going to do for this pattern is I'm going to outline the entire store and then the inside of the store in the gold, and then the store points are going to be in different colors. So I'm going to show you again the simple back stitch, and this should be fairly simple, just going, of course now I'm not going to be able to pick up 3 beads. Let me see if I can get one more on there. These little suckers are flying everywhere. If anybody has any tips about this, I would love to hear them. Okay, there's 3 beads. And I'm going to let them fall to the fabric. Hold them securely in place. Come down right at the end of the last bead. Come up behind the second one. And I may get that. I'm sure it's going to take a little time for me to get my rhythm with this, but yeah. Okay, there we go. And then go through the second and third beads. And now we've made a second back stitch. And it's just a tad wobbly, but I'm pretty happy with it considering this is my first try. So that's what I'm going to continue to do. I'm just going to continue along this outline and outline the outside of the store and then the inside of it. And I'll be back once I've got that complete. Okay, so I've been finished beading the outline of my pattern, and where my beading is left off is about right here. So this is I'm gonna go ahead and just start working in this store point, since that's where about where I've left off with beading this part of the outline. And I have had to make a couple of adjustments again. I did have to take the hoop off because when I was trying to get into these inner spaces that were like further away from the edge of the hoop, it was harder for me to hold the beads in place while I back stitched them. So it really did end up being a little bit more difficult to work with the hoop. So that's one adjustment I had to make, and then you can see I just kind of rolled my excess fabric up and just used paper clips to hold it in place, so it's kind of helped keep it out of my way while I was stitching. So now that I'm here and ready to start the color, I've realized I have a couple of different options here as far as how I could bead the inside. Of course, I could do it very free form, and I could do little squares within the pattern, or I could go straight across, you know, going this way with my beadwork, or I could continue to follow the store points and do my beadwork, you know, in that direction and just follow the outline and keep working it until I work to the inside, or I could just try and simply go straight up and down, disregarding, you know, following the shape. So anyway, so you can see there's choices to be made because I've got different ways that I could do this beadwork. So I thought about it, and I think what I'm going to do is just continue to follow the shape, because I think that's going to have the neatest look, you know, just be very neat and simple and streamlined, and not be too busy, because there's already going to be quite a bit going on with the different colors and then the hand embroidery that I'm going to do in the center. So I decided to keep it simple and just continue to follow around, and just, you know, until I work all the way on the inside. And I'm going to continue to use the back stitching with the 3 beads until I get into areas where I have to fill in, and these beads are a little bit irregular in size, so that's actually going to work to my favor when I have little corners or something I have to fill in. I should be able to find a bead or two that will fill the space in nicely. And one of the things I want to show you that I learned along the way too was to get these points, fairly pointed. When I first did it, when I got to the end bead, started to, with my thread coming out here, I started to just pick up the 3 beads and start working down. But when I did that, it pulled this corner to a rounded shape, and that's not what I wanted. I wanted it to be, a pointed shape. So what I did was just went straight down from that end bead through my fabric, and then came up just a little bit over from it, not very much, and came back up through the fabric with my thread, and then picked up my 3 beads and started down this way, and then that gave me a nice point. At all of my corners I have nice points. So that was a little something I've learned along the way. But I'm going to start beading with the green and show you a little bit of that. And forgive me for the camera angles. I'm trying very hard to stay in camera, but it can be a little bit difficult. Oh, and the other thing was I had my beads inside the well here, but I was finding it difficult to reach in with my needle and grab them and pull them up. So what I did was put them in these more shallow wells in my bead board, and I found that it's easier to run my needle through rather, like this, and pick beads up. So they see I've got 3, and I'm gonna let them fall to the fabric. Oh, I'm sorry. Got a little bit ahead of myself. I needed to actually come up through the fabric first. So let me pull those beads off. Okay. It would help. So I'm going to start about right here. Okay, now I need to pick those 3 beads up. And again, let them fall to the fabric. And while holding them in place, go down at the end where that last bead is, pull it a little bit taut and move the beads where they're in place, and then I'm going to come up through the fabric behind the second bead, and then run the needle through the second and the third bead. And now I'm ready to pick 3 more up. Which this has actually presented more of a challenge to me, and it's taken more time than the actual stitching, is trying to get 3 beads loaded on my needle. Again, I would welcome any suggestions. You can see I stitch a lot faster than I pick beads up. Okay. Sorry. Okay, so I've got 3 more beads loaded. I'm going to go down through the fabric at the end of that last bead. And then come up through the fabric behind the second bead. And then through the second and third bead. and I'm ready for 3 more. And so I'm going to do that. I'm going to go up to this point, and there again just fill in with a bead that will fit within that point, and then turn my corner and come down this way and go along my outline, and then start back up with the next row going that way. So once I get the green filled in, I'll come back and show you what that looks like finished.